All right, hi there. We're finishing up with talking about the first time that Elphaba and Glinda have met. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little excerpt of that. We're starting in the middle of the page. The parlor was filled with pretty young women, all wearing green or blue and trailing black shawls like exhausted shadows behind them. Glinda was glad for the natural advantages of her flaxen hair, stood by a window so the light could dazzle itself off her curls. She hardly sipped the tea. In a side room, the attendant Amas were serving themselves from a metal urn and laughing and yakking already as if they were old friends from the same village. It was somewhat grotesque, all those dumpy women smiling at each other, making marketplace noise. Glinda hadn't read the fine print very closely. She hadn't realized there would be a need for roomies. Or perhaps she had her parents paid extra so she could have a private room? And where would Amma Clutch stay? Looking about her, she could tell that some of these dollies came from families much better off than hers. The pearls and diamonds on them. Glinda was glad she had chosen a simple silver collar with metonite straps. There was something vulgar about traveling in jewels. As she realized this truth, she codified it into a saying. At the earliest perfect opportunity, she would bring it out as proof of her having opinions, and of having traveled. The overdressed traveler betrays more interest in being seen than in seeing, she murmured, trying it out, while the true traveler knows that the novel world about her serves as the most appropriate accessory. Good, very good. Madame Morrible counted heads, gripped a cup of tea, and shooed everyone into the main hall. There, Glinda learned that allowing Amma Clutch to go looking for surgery had been a colossal mistake. Apparently, all that chatter among Ammas hadn't been frivolous and social. They had been instructed to sort out among them whose young lady would room with whose. The Ammas had been relied upon to get to the nub of the matter more quickly than the students themselves. No one had spoken for Glinda. She had gone unrepresented. The Ammas were like housekeepers. They were some people that were in charge of the children that were at the university. They were responsible, kind of like their nannies, responsible for taking care of them. After the forgettable welcome remarks, as couple by couple, the students and Ammas left to locate their lodgings and settle in. Glinda found herself growing pale with embarrassment. Amma Clutch, the old fool, would have fixed up nicely with someone, just a notch or two above on the social ladder. Near enough that Glinda would suffer no shame, and above enough to make it worth the while of socializing. She thought that if Amma Clutch had been there, she would have taken care of her. But now, all the better young misses were linked together, diamond to diamond, emerald to emerald, for all she could tell. As the room began to empty, Glinda wondered if she shouldn't go up and interrupt Madame Morrible and explain the problem. Glinda was, after all, an Arduenna of the uplands, at least on one side. It was a hideous accident. Her eyes teared up. But she hadn't the nerve. She stayed perched on the edge of the fragile, stupid chair. Except for her, all the center of the room had cleared out now, and the shyer, more useless girls were left around the edges and the shadows. This is her saying that the girls that are around her are beneath her. So what kind of an attitude do you think that is? Glinda alone sounded like an unclaimed valise or suitcase. Now the rest of you are here without Ammas, I understand, said Madame Morrible, a bit sniffily. Since we require chaperonage, I will assign each of you to one of the 3 dormitories for freshers, which sleep 15 girls each. There is no social stigma to the dormitory, I might add. None at all. But she was lying, and not even convincingly. Glinda finally stood up. Please, Madame Morrible, there is a mistake. I am Glinda of Arduennas. My Amma took a nail in her foot on the voyage and was detained for a day or 2. I am not in the dormitory class, you see. How sad for you, said Madame Morrible, smiling. I'm sure your Amma will be pleased to be a chaperone in, shall we say, the pink dormitory? 4th floor on the right? No, she would not, interrupted Glinda quite bravely. I am not here to sleep in a dormitory. Pink or otherwise, you have misunderstood. I have not misunderstood, Miss Glinda, said Madame Morrible, growing even more fish-like as her eyes began to bulge. There is an accident. There is tardiness. There are decisions to be made. As you are not equipped, through your Amma, to make your own decision, I am empowered to make it for you. Please, We are busy, and I must name the other girls who will join you in the pink dormitory. I would have a private word with you, madam, said Galinda in desperation. For myself, dormitory partners, or a single roomie, it is no matter. But I cannot recommend that you ask my Amma to oversee other girls, for reasons I may not say in public. She was lying as fast as she could, and better than Madame Morrible, who seemed at least intrigued. You strike me as impertinent, Miss Galinda, she said mildly. Impertinent means that you show up your elders. I have not yet struck you, Madame Morrible. Galinda delivered the daring line with her sweetest smile. Madame Morrible chose to laugh. Thank Lurline! A spark a spunk! You may come to my chambers this evening and tell me the story of your Amma's shortcomings, as I should know them. But I will compromise with you, Miss Galinda. Unless you object, I will have to ask your Amma to chaperone both you and another girl, one who comes without an Amma. For you see, all the other students with Ammas are already paired off, and you are the odd one out. I am certain my Amma could manage that at least. Madame Morrible scanned the pages of names and said, Very well. To join Miss Galinda of the Ardunas in a double room, shall I invite the Thropster descending of Nest Harding's Elphaba? No one stirred. Elphaba? Said Madame Morrible again, adjusting her bangles and pressing 2 fingers at the bottom of her throat. The girl was in the back of the room, a pauper in a red dress with fraudy fretwork and in clumpy opial boots. At first, Galinda thought what she saw was some trick of the light, a reflection off the adjacent building, covered in vine and flat moss. Uh-oh. But as Elphaba moved forward, lugging her own carpet bags, it became obvious that she was green. A hatchet-faced girl with putrescent green skin and long, foreign-looking black hair. A Munchkinlander by birth, though with many childhood years spent in the Quadling country, read Madame Morrible from her notes. How fascinating for us all, Miss Elphaba. We shall look forward to hearing tales of exotic climes and times. Miss Galinda and Miss Elphaba, here are your keys. You may take room 22 on the second floor. On the second floor. That's where they're going to be staying. She smiled broadly at Galinda as the girls came forward. Travel is so broadening, she intoned. Galinda started. The curse of her own words lobbed back at her. She curtsied and fled. Elphaba, eyes on the floor, followed behind. So what I want you to think about is their meeting. Was it a positive meeting or was it a negative meeting? As we know from What Is This Feeling, they did not get along with each other when they first met. So we're going to read next section, part 2, to find out what happened when Elphaba and Galinda were assigned as roommates. By the time Amma Clutch arrived the next day, her foot bandaged to 3 times its natural size, Elphaba had already unpacked her few belongings. They hung rag-like on hooks in the cupboard, thin, shapeless shifts shamed into a corner by the fulsome hopes and starched bustles and plaited shoulders and cushioned elbows of Galinda's wardrobe. I am happy as cheese to be your Amma, too. Don't matter to me, said Amma Clutch, smiling broadly in Elphaba's direction, before Galinda had a chance to get Amma Clutch alone and demand that her minder refuse. Of course my papa's paying you to be my Amma, said Galinda meaningfully. But Amma Clutch answered, Not as much as all that, Ducky, not as much as all that. I can be making up my own mind. Amma, said Galinda, when Elphaba had left to use the mildewy facilities. Amma, are you blind? That Munchkin little girl is green. Odd, isn't it? I thought all Munchkinlanders were tiny. She's a proper height, though. I guess they come in a variety of sizes. Oh, are you bothered by the green? Well, it might do you some good. If you let it. You affect worldly airs, Galinda, but you don't know the world yet. I think it's a lark. Why not? Why ever not? It's not yours to organize my education, worldly or otherwise, Amma Clutch. No, my dear, said Amma Clutch. You've made this mess all by your lonesome. I'm merely being of service. So Galinda was stuck. Last night's brief interview with Madame Morrible had not provided any escape route either. Galinda had arrived promptly in a dotted muslin skirt with lace bodice, a vision, as she said to herself, in nocturnal purples and midnight blues. Madame Morrible bade her enter the reception room, in which a small cluster of leather chairs and a settee were drawn up before an unnecessary fire. The head poured mint tea and offered crystallized ginger wrapped in pearl fruit leaves. She indicated a chair for Galinda, but herself stood by the mantelpiece like a big game hunter. In the best tradition of the upper class savoring its luxuries, they sipped and nibbled in silence at first. This gave Galinda the chance to observe that Madame Morrible was fish-like, not merely in countenance, but in dress. Her loose-fitting cream foxo flowed like a huge airy bladder from the high-filled neckline to the knees, where it was tightly gathered and dropped straight to the floor, hugging the calves and ankles in neat, anticlimactic pleats. She looked for all the world like a giant carp in a men's club, and a dull, bored carp at that, not even a sentient carp. A carp is a fish. Now, your Amma, my dear, the reason she is incapable of supervising a dormitory? I'm all ears. Galinda had taken all afternoon to prepare. You see, Madam Head, I don't like to say it publicly, but Amma Clutch suffered a terrible fall last summer when we were picnicking in the Pertha Hills. She reached for a handful of wild mountain thyme and went pitching over a cliff. She lay for weeks in a coma, and when she emerged, she had no memory of the accident at all. If you asked her about it, she wouldn't even know what she meant. Amnesia by trauma. I see. How very tiresome for you. But why did this make her unequal to the job I proposed? She's become addled. Addled means she's become more along the lines of senile. Amma Clutch, on occasion, gets confused as to what has life and what doesn't. She will sit and talk to, say, a chair, then relate its history back to us. Its aspirations, its revelation. She talks to furniture. Its joy, its sorrows, said Madame Morrible. How truly novel the emotional life of furniture. I never. But silly as this is, and a cause for hours of merriment, the corollary element is more alarming. Madame Morrible, I must tell you that Amma Clutch sometimes forgets that people are alive, or animals. Galinda paused and then added, or animals, even. And remember, animals with a capital A are the talking animals. Go on, my dear. It is all right for me because Amma has been my Amma all my life, and I know her. I know her ways. But she can sometimes forget a person is there, or needs her, or is a person. Once she cleaned a wardrobe and tipped it over onto the houseboy, breaking his back. She didn't register as screaming right there, right at her feet. She folded the nightclothes, had a conversation with my mother's evening gown, asking it all sorts of impertinent questions. What a fascinating condition, said Madame Morrible, and how vexing for you, really. I couldn't have allowed her to accept responsibility for 14 other girls, Galinda confided. For me alone, there is no problem. I love the foolish old woman, in a way. Madame Morrible had said, but what of your roomie? Can you jeopardize her well-being? I didn't ask for her. Galinda looked ahead in her glazed, unblinking eyes. The poor Munchkin lender appears to be used to a life of distress. Either she will adjust or, I assume, she will petition you to be removed from my room. Unless, of course, you feel it is your duty to move her for her own safety. She's trying to get rid of her. Madame Morrible said, I suppose if Miss Elphaba cannot live with what you give her, she will leave Craig Hall on her own accord, don't you think? It was the we in what we give her. Madame Morrible was binding Galinda in a campaign. They both knew it. Galinda struggled to maintain her autonomy. But she was only 17, and she had suffered that same indignity of exclusion in the main hall just hours ago. She didn't know what Madame Morrible could have against Elphaba, except the looks of her. But there was clearly something. What was it? She sensed it would be wrong somehow. Don't you think, dear, said Madame Morrible, bowing a little bit forward like a fish, arching in slow-motion leap. To understand that part, Madame Morrible doesn't like Elphaba for her own reasons, and we find out why later on. And she's trying to get Galinda to agree with her on that. Well, of course we must do what we can, said Galinda, as vaguely as possible. But she seemed the fish, and caught on a most clever hook. Out of the shadows of the reception room came a small tick-tock, a little robot thing about 3 feet high, made of burnished bronze, with an identifying plate screwed onto its front. The plate said Smith & Tinker's Mechanical Man in ornate script. The clockwork servant collected the empty teacups and whirled itself away. Galinda didn't know how long it had been there, or what it had heard, but she had never liked tic-tac creatures. Elphaba had a bad case of what Galinda called the reading sulks. Alpha didn't curl up. She was too bony to curl. But she jackknifed herself nearer to herself, her funny pointed green nose poking in the moldy leaves of a book. She played with her hair while she read, coiling it up and down around fingers so thin and twig-like as to seem almost exoskeletal. Her hair never curled, no matter how often Alphabet twined it around her hands. It was beautiful hair in an odd, awful way, with a shine like the pelt of a healthy giltibist. Black silk, coffee spun into threads, night rain. Galinda, not given to metaphor on the whole, found Alphabet's hair entrancing, the more so because the girl was otherwise so ugly. They didn't talk much. Galinda was too busy forging alliances with the better girls who had been her rightful roomy prospects. No doubt she could switch rooms at half-term, or at any rate, next fall. So Galinda left Alphabet alone, and she flew down the hall to gossip with her new friends, Milla, Fanny, and Shen. Just as in children's books about boarding school, each new friend was wealthier than the one before. At first, Galinda didn't mention who her roomie was, and Alphabet showed no signs of expecting Galinda's company, which was a relief. But the gossip had to start sooner or later. The first wave of discussion about Alphabet concerned her wardrobe and her evident poverty, as if her classmates were above noticing her sickly and sickening color. Someone told me that Madam Head had said Miss Alphabet was the Throp third descending from the Nest Harding, said Fanny, who was also Munchkinlander, but one of diminutive stock, not full size like the Throp family. The Throps were highly regarded in Nest Hardings and even beyond. The eminent Throp put together the area's militia and tore up the yellow brick road that the Ozma Regent had been laying in when we were all small, before the Glorious Revolution. There was no callousness in the eminent Throp or his wife or family, including his granddaughter Melina. You can be assured, by callousness, of course, Fanny meant greenness. So they're talking about Alphabet's family, and she actually comes from some pretty regal family members. Her grandfather would have been Melina's father, who would have been Alphabet's great-grandfather. So he was the eminent Throp, or the ruling party. But how the mighty have fallen. She's ragged as a gypsy, observed Milla. Have you ever seen such tawdry dresses? Tawdry means they're not pretty. Her ama should be sacked. She has no ama, I think, said Shen. Galinda, who knew for sure, said nothing. They said she had spent time in Quadling country, Milla went on. Perhaps her family had been exiled as criminals? Or they were speculators in rubies, said Shen. Then where's the wealth, snapped Milla. Speculators in rubies did very well, Miss Shen. Our Miss Alphabet doesn't have 2 barter tokens to rub together and call her own. We're talking about her. Perhaps it's a kind of religious calling, a chosen poverty, suggested Fanny. And at this nonsense, they all threw back their heads and chortled. Alphabet, coming into the buttery for a cup of coffee, caused them to escalate into louder roars of laughter. Alphabet did not look over at them, but every other student did glance their way. Each girl longed to be included in the jollity, which made the 4 new friends feel just fine. So we're going to stop right there, where they're talking about Alphabet, and then they go on to talk a little bit about Galinda's education, and we can talk a little bit about that one, and I'll keep reading. Galinda was slow coming to terms with actual learning. She had considered her admission into Shiz University as a sort of testimony to her brilliance, and believed that she would adorn the halls of learning with her beauty and occasional clever sayings. She supposed glumly that she had meant to be a sort of living marble bust. This is useful intelligence. Admire her. Isn't she lovely? It hadn't actually dawned on Galinda that there was more to learning, and thus, furthermore, that she was expected to do it. The education of all the new girls chiefly wanted, of course, had nothing to do with Madame Morrible, or the prattling animals at the lecterns and on dice. What the girls wanted wasn't equations or quotations or orations. They wanted Shiz itself, city life, the broad, offensive panoply of life, and life seamlessly entwined. Galinda was relieved that Alphabet never took part in the outings the Yamas organized. Since they often stopped at a lunchroom for a modest meal, the weekly brigade became known informally as the Chowder and Marching Society. The university district was aflame with autumn color, not just of dying leaves, but also fraternity pennants fluttering from rooftop and spire. Galinda soaked up the architecture of shiz, here and there, mostly in protected college yard side streets. The oldest surviving domestic architecture still leaned, ancient, wattle and daub, and exposed stud framing held up like paralytic grannies by stronger, newer relatives on either side. Then, in dizzying succession, unparalleled glories, bloodstone medieval, methodic, both least and the least fantastical late, Galantine with its symmetries and restraint, Galantine reformed with all of its festering ogies and broken pediments, bluestone revival, imperial bombast, and industrial modern, or as the critics in the liberal press put it, high hostile crud style, the form propagated by the modernity-minded Wizard of Oz. Galinda was very much into the buildings. Besides architecture, the excitement was tame, to be sure. On one notable occasion, which no Craig Hall girl present ever forgot, there was some mischief that went on down in the areas that they went down to do, and they were worshiping Lurleen, the Fairy Queen. They all pretended to be shocked, but they watched the boys get into trouble, and it was a joke, and the wizard was against all of that kind of thing. So we will stop there. One Saturday evening, when the Amish had a rare night off, they had tucked themselves into a pleasure faith meeting in Ticknor's circus. Galinda had a brief and silly squabble with Fanny and Shen Shen, after which she retired early to her bedchamber, complaining of a headache. Alpha was sitting up in her bed with the commissary brown blanket tucked around her. She was hunched forward over a book as usual, and her hair hung down like brackets on either side of her face. She looked at Galinda like one of those etchings, the natural history books were full of them, of old Winky Mountain women who hide their strangers with a shawl over the head. Alpha was munching on the pits of an apple, having eaten all the rest of it. "Well, you look cozy enough, Miss Alphaba," said Galinda challengingly. In 3 months, it was the first social remark she had managed to make to her roommate. "Looks are only looks," said Alphaba, not looking up. "Will it break your concentration if I sit in front of the fire?" "You cast a shadow if you sit just there." "Oh, sorry," said Galinda, and moved. "Mustn't cast shadows, must we, when urgent words are waiting to be read?" Alphaba was back at her book already and didn't answer. "What the dickens are you reading, night and day?" It seemed as if Alphaba were coming up for air from a still isolated pool. "Well, I don't read the same thing every day, you know. Tonight I'm reading some of the speeches of the early Unionist fathers." "Why would anyone want to do that?" "I don't know. I don't even know if I want to read them. I'm just reading them." "But why? Miss Alphaba the Delirious, why?" Alphaba looked up at Glinda and smiled. "Alphaba the Delirious, I like it." She gave her a nickname. Before she had a chance to bite it back, Galinda returned the smile. At the same time, a sweeping wind sent a handful of hail against the glass, and the latch broke. She smiled at her. Galinda leaped to swing the casement shut, but Alphaba scuttled to the far corner of the room, away from the wet. "Give me the leather luggage grip, Miss Alphaba, from inside my satchel there on the shelf. Behind the hat boxes, yes, and I'll secure this until we can get the porter to fix it tomorrow." They found common ground. They didn't like the wing. Alphaba found the strap, but in doing so, the hat boxes tumbled down, and 3 colorful hats rode across onto the cold floor. While Galinda scrabbled up on a chair to organize the window shut, again, Alphaba returned the hats to their boxes. "Oh, try it on, try that one on," said Galinda. She meant to have something to laugh at, to tell Miss Fanny and Shin Shin about it, and to work her way back into their good graces. She found a hat for Alphaba. "Oh, I daren't, Miss Galinda," Alphaba said, and went to set the hat away. "No, do it, I insist," Galinda said. "For luck, I've never seen you in something pretty." "I don't wear pretty things." "What's the harm?" said Galinda. "Just here. No one else need see you." Alphaba stood facing the fire, but turned her head on her shoulders to look long and unblinkingly at Galinda, who had not yet hopped down from the chair. The Munchlander was in her nightgown, a drab sack without benefit of lace edging or piping. The green face above the wheat-gray fabric seemed almost to glow, and the glorious night straight black hair fell right over her. Affable looked like something between an animal and an animal. Animal of animal origin, animals who can talk. Like something more than life, but not quite life. There was an expectancy, but no intuition, was it? Like a child who has never remembered having a dream being told to have sweet dreams. So she tries the hat on. And that stops for the evening because we'll pick up where we stop next week with Popular.